All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Excuse me if I need to jump over and admit some more people as I'm talking. So welcome to Senior College Night. Thank you all for coming. I hope you find the evening informative and you walk away with more information than you had coming in. Yet, if you had the information coming in, it's probably because the counselors have done a great job working with you on the process already. So just a couple items. I'll just ask that you keep yourself muted until we get to the Q&A at the end. As I mentioned earlier, if you logged in late, it's just me tonight. So I'm going to do my best to monitor the chat. I have two laptops going. When you present in Google Meet, you can only see your presentation. So I'll have to see the chat on the second computer. With that said, feel free to put things in the chat. Just bear with me and be patient if I don't respond to them right away. And feel free to direct me back to something that may have been posted when we get to the Q&A at the end, and I have a better chance of looking at what's in there. So again, I'm Dan Doherty, Director of Counseling, North Shore Schools. I oversee all the counselors and some of the social workers K through 12. And the goal of tonight's presentation is really to walk you through how to apply to college, what applications look like, and answer some kind of frequently asked questions that have come up from last spring up until now. Okay, just a quick overview of the department. We have 5 counselors: Ms. Fawcett, Ms. Gentile, Mr. Yarmouthie, Ms. Nelson, Mr. Shea. You guys are all seniors. I'm sure you're very familiar with them by now. They are all extremely well-versed in the college process. Some have background as admissions counselors themselves. Again, I'll just ask that everyone mute themselves so we don't get the feedback. But the counselors are your go-to people for everything college, all the scheduling situations that are going on this year. So please utilize your counselor. As I said, they're all very experienced, and we're here to help you through the process. Just to share with you a little bit about where we are now. On Friday, we did a senior assembly for all the seniors, and we really went through the nuts and bolts of what they need to do to apply to college, how to utilize the Common App, how to link their Naviance account to Common App, how to invite their teachers in terms of letters of recommendation. It was really a step-by-step process. That video was sent to you in the email that had the link for this presentation. The PowerPoint slide was sent to you. It's also available on the counseling website. So we're really trying to get as much information out about how the process works to you and the students as best we can. We had a financial aid night last week that was pretty well attended. That video was also shared with you. One of the advantages of these presentations is the recording piece now, so we can really share all that with you. If you see something in those videos, if you even watch those videos, and you have a question, feel free to email your counselor or email me, but we hope you take advantage of those opportunities. All right, so welcome to senior year. We hope you haven't, not followed the first slide yet in terms of stressing out. I know it's a stressful time. It's typically a stressful time with COVID and all that's gone on. I'm sure it's increasingly more stressful. I've spoken to a number of you about SAT situations and questions that have come up with college admissions and things like that. And, our goal in the counseling office is to ease stress as much as possible and to help you as much as possible. So please utilize your school counselor. Our goal is for all the counselors to meet with their seniors by mid-October. And I've spoken with all 5 counselors, and that's really the plan, is to have individual meetings with the seniors to make sure that they understand how to apply, they understand where to apply, they understand what they need to give the counselor. We are still doing parent meetings. They will be virtual as per the reopening plan. If you feel like you would like a senior college meeting with your counselor, just send them an email or give them a call, and they would be happy to set that up with you. I know they've done a bunch already. Just some advice, having worked with families in the college process for a long time now. Organization is really key in terms of not only paper organization, in terms of the materials you may receive. It's important to kind of set up a home base in your house, and if your house is anything like mine, it can get a little messy, and it's hard to do that. But trying to designate a space where college letters may go, or Advertisements from colleges may go. And then once the student starts to apply, saving all the passwords is super critical. So I know a lot of students will use their phone, they'll put it in the notes section. When you apply to college, each school will send you back a login and a password, and that's where the students will find out how they're accepted. So, I've always advised when I was a counselor and working with families still, create a spreadsheet, have on there the school, the deadline, and then have a spot for ID and password, and you could just have it all in one place. With Google now, it can be a shared doc and live in there, so the students can put that in there. So that's just some things that could help as you start to apply down the road. Meeting deadlines, super important. The counselors will certainly help you with this, but deadlines will sneak up on us. I don't know about you, but I feel like October snuck up on me pretty quickly, and those deadlines will start to creep up in terms of when you need to give information to counselors and forms to counselors and things like that. Really, October 15th is sneaking up on us, and that's a big kind of deadline to get information to counselors for the November 1st deadline. But if you take nothing else from this presentation tonight, please know that you're not in this process alone. The counselors are here to help you. They go through it every year. They stay up to date and current in terms of what's going on in the field, and we meet as a group. So we really work as a team also in terms of advising families and working together. Okay, college deadlines. So as I said, some of these deadlines are kind of creeping up on us. There's a couple schools that have October 15th deadlines, Georgia Tech, University of Georgia, South Carolina, to name a few. Outside of that, typically your first deadline or the student's first deadline would be November 1st. And then I'll talk you through briefly, I'm sure the counselors have done this already, just the different decision types. So early decision is a binding contract. You can only apply to one school early decision. You can still apply to other schools early action. And early decision is a big deal. I would hope that the student will have had a conversation with their counselor by now if they are considering applying early decision. If they haven't, that's okay. I know it's limited in terms of when students are in school, but you should check in with them and have a conversation about it. As a family, it's a big decision because you're committing to that school. So if you're accepted, you're going essentially. The risk in that is really the financial piece. You won't know what financial aid package you're getting, and if you're accepted, you're committing to go to that school. So as a family, I would just advise that you have a serious conversation about finances and what's realistic, and leading up to an early decision application. In prior years, I would advise that you visit the school, right? But with schools being shut down last March, that may not have been an option for you. There are still ways to visit schools and get a feel for them virtually. We are still doing individual virtual college visits with colleges. There was about 3 or 4 today. So I encourage the students to go to those. And colleges do have links to virtual tours online. Colleges do have virtual individual sessions online, a lot of them. And if there's a particular school that your child's interested in and you want contact information for the reps, encourage them to speak to their counselor or reach out to me. Getting back to early decision. So really, it's a November 1st deadline. An advantage of early decision is you'll hear back usually late December. For early action, you'll hear back early to mid January. I always get the question, does it benefit you to apply early decision? And it can. So some schools will take upwards of 30% to 40% of their class early decisions. So if it can be an advantage to apply because it makes it that much more competitive to apply regular or early action. Other schools, they take 10%. It's not as big of a push. So just something to consider. Early decision 2, there are a handful of schools that have early decision 2. It's the same policy and procedure. It's just later in January. They'll give you an opportunity to apply, let's say, early decision 1 to a different school. If you have a second option, you could wait and do that early decision 2. The same stipulations apply, though, where it's a binding contract. All right, early action. Years ago, early action used to be November 15th. Early decision used to be November 1st. It's really all merged to November 1st now, so early action is a big deadline. There's really no drawback to early action. It's non-binding. You could apply to as many schools as you like. You can compare financial aid packages. If things get better with COVID and you're able to visit, you could do that in the spring leading up to a May 1st decision date. So there's really no tricky stipulations with early action. Now, restrictive early action is a whole nother ball game. There's a couple schools, Stanford, Yale, to name a few, that have a restrictive early action policy. Stanford's policy reads, if you apply to Stanford with a decision plan of restrictive early action, you may not apply to any other private college or university under early action, restrictive early action, early decision, or an early notification plan. So that language will vary depending on the school, but typically they want to limit and know that you're not going to apply early decision to another institution so that they still have a chance to get you. But again, that really won't impact the majority of the people on this call. It's really a small number of schools. If you have questions about that, please speak to your counselor or feel free to send me an email. Regular decision is typically a January 1st deadline, and you will hear back typically February or March. And again, you can apply to as many schools as you like. You can compare financial aid packages. You can visit. And how you apply may be a combination of all of these. And then lastly, rolling admission, there's no deadlines. We always advise students to apply, treat it like a November 1st deadline. Some schools will let you know super early. I had a student who applied to Arizona on a Monday and heard back on a Thursday. So some schools will kind of make those decisions super quick. They get a lot of applications. They want to get those notifications out. So we really advise that students, again, treat those like November 1st, get those applications out early, and you'll hear back really at any point in time from the rolling admission schools. And a lot of times those are the bigger, the Big Ten schools and things like that, where they get a lot of applications, so they're not going to wait for a deadline to make those decisions. And just to clarify, if a school's a November 1st deadline, typically the way it works, they wait for all their November 1st applications to come in. There's a period of time where they're sorting through in the office, usually from November, and December, and then you'll hear back in January. For rolling schools, they'll start to read those applications as they come in. So that's kind of the difference there. All right, types of applications. I'm not going to spend too much time on this because a lot more and more schools have shifted to the Common App. But really the main types of applications are the Common Application, the Coalition Application, and then their school-specific applications. So City University of New York, for example, has its own application. Nassau Community has its own application. My alma mater, Georgetown, likes to be difficult, and they still have their own application and separate supplements and things like that. But more and more schools have shifted to the Common App. The Coalition App was relatively popular over the last 5 or 6 years because schools like Maryland were exclusively Coalition, Florida was exclusively Coalition. Those schools have since shifted to the Common App. So the Coalition application has since kind of fallen to the wayside a little bit, especially this year. So that's good for the students because it's less work, and the applications are pretty similar to begin with. So that's pretty much this slide. These are just the different types of applications that students may encounter. All right, so how do they apply? So all the applications are online. You'll pay the application fee online. There's a FERPA agreement that you would waive, allowing us to release your transcripts and letters of recommendation and all the things that need to go. Students will then need to link their Common Application to Naviance. There's a video that was sent to the students about how to do this. It was clearly explained in the Senior Assembly on Friday. That video was shared with you. If you have any questions about this, or the students have any questions, please speak to your counselor, let me know. And then completing the processing form. So the processing form, we created a class of 2021 Google Classroom, and we have all the forms up there. And that was really in preparation in case we need to go remote at some point. We needed to have these forms accessible to everyone. So those forms are there. They're on the website, and they're physically in the guidance office if anyone needs them. We ask that those forms are given to the counselor 2 weeks prior to the deadline. So if a student, let's say someone has an October 15th deadline, they would really need to give those forms to the counselor by the end of this week, really October 1st, October 2nd, to give them time to process the application so that those applications can go out on time. But October 15th is really a big date. Most students will have November 1st deadlines. So we ask that we get those forms into the counselor 2 weeks prior. That may look a little bit different this year. We know we have some remote students. In the past, we would not accept these forms electronically, and we physically said you had to meet with the counselor to hand them to them. They can be accepted electronically this year, but we just ask that you communicate with the counselor and just make sure that they get your email. Like if you send an email with a processing form, you don't hear back, it's okay to nag them. This is super important. So just make sure that you get a confirmed receipt email with that. Okay. The next piece, again, in years past, a little bit more important because of all the testing optional schools this year, but sending the SAT and/or ACT scores to schools. The counselors do not send any test scores. They're not on the transcript. We may not even have access to all the scores if you didn't list the test center code on the Scantron when you took the exam. So it's important that you as a family send these scores. You can pick and choose what scores you want to send. Maybe you're sending the ACT and you're not sending the SAT, or vice versa. But those scores will need to go to the colleges as well. Okay, then the last piece is inviting the teachers on Naviance. Again, there was a video sent out to students on how to do this. It was clearly explained in the Friday assembly that we had. If anyone has any questions, please let us know. But this is important, and this is really time sensitive. Like this should be done now if it hasn't been done already. Please invite your teachers on Naviance who are writing letters of recommendation for you. Okay, so there's really a couple different pieces that go to the colleges. The first and foremost is the application, right? And that would come from the student. The second is the transcript, school profile, and the counselor piece, which is also includes the letter of recommendation from the counselor. All that is going to come from the counseling office. And then the third piece is the letters of recommendation that go into Naviance and then are sent through Naviance. So all those pieces do need to be there by November 1st. Okay. All right. So what do you look for when you're applying to a school? And this, I'm sure, was discussed in your junior meeting with your counselor. But there's really a couple different factors. Location. Do you want to stay home? Do you want to go away? Do you want to be in a city? Do you want to be in a suburb? The size of the school and the class size can really factor into that. The cost, obviously, which I'm sure is first and foremost in the mind of the parents. So the cost will definitely factor in financial aid and things like that. And I'll talk about a little bit more about the cost in a little while. And the academic programs, the philosophy of the school, that can all factor in terms of major, or if you're looking for an ROTC program or you want to play a sport in college, and are they Division III? Are they Division I? How competitive is it to get into those programs? That can certainly all factor into looking at colleges. And then the last, but in my mind, really the most important is the fit, right? We want to try to find a school where the student and the family can check off a box saying that, yes, this is in the location that I want to go to. It's the right size, it's affordable, and they have the major that I'm looking for. We hope that all that lines up. And working with families for a long time, sometimes families get caught up in, the sticker that goes on the back of the car, and is it a better school? And, my advice is always, the better school is the one where your child does well, is successful, and is happy. And that's really, that should be the goal. And I know that the counselors echo that when they're working with students. So again, just keep that in mind as you're looking at schools. As you start to receive acceptances and you want to reach out to the counselors and have a conversation with them about what might be the best fit for the student, or the student may change their mind as they're going through the process, we encourage you to have those conversations, and the counselors can certainly help you with that. All right, so we talked about what you look for as a student. Now we're going to talk a little bit about what colleges look for in the students. So the first piece that they're going to look at is the transcript. So the transcript is a 3 to 4 year indicator of how they've done in school. And a big part of what they're going to look for is the types of courses that the student has taken. Have they challenged themselves? And what's challenging for one student may not be challenging for another. For For some students, it's taking multiple AP or IB courses. For other students, maybe it's taking a language when they're language exempt, or taking a Regents class when they were in an ICT program previously. So, that's all going to vary depending on the student. But the transcript and the GPA is really the first piece that they're going to look at. The next piece, and again, this is kind of shifted due to COVID, is typically test scores. So the ACT or the SAT. And more schools, and I'd say the majority of schools, are test optional now. And we have a slide in a minute or two where we'll talk about what test optional means and are they really test optional. But that would be really the second piece that they look at. And then the next three pieces really aren't in any order. They just kind of compile to make what we call kind of the 5 spokes of admissions. So activities, and this could be extracurriculars, it could be a job, it could be a sport, it could be music, it could be a club, whatever it might be. Sometimes families I speak to will say, oh no, my child never did sports and I need to get them in a sport and it's senior year, and what sports can they do? And when colleges are creating their incoming freshman class, they're trying to make it a diverse class. So yes, they need athletes, but they also need musicians, and they want people who are in drama, and they want people who have done debate and things like that. So it's not that they're looking for a well-rounded student and everyone to be that. They're trying to fill in gaps within their class. So, sometimes it's better that a student has really committed to an activity for 4 years and done that and taken on a leadership role. So I always encourage students, don't sell yourself short. And this is where you as parents can come in. Take a look at what they've put on the Common App, if they'll let you. I've worked with students for a long time, and it's amazing that they'll come in with 3 activities on their Common App, and then in a 5-minute conversation, you hear about 4 other activities that they're like, well, I didn't think I could put this because I did it on a weekend, or, does helping my grandmother shovel snow really count? And yes, like you can, you have flexibility with what you put on the Common App. So there's a spot to put 10 activities. You don't want to make up 10, but you do want to try to flesh that out with the students and encourage them to not sell themselves short, and have a conversation with them. And if they won't talk to you, encourage them to go see their counselor and have that conversation with them, because the counselors can typically get more information out of them than their parents. So the next piece, letters of recommendation. The last slide, we talked about how to invite the students, how to invite the teachers, excuse me. This piece is also, due to COVID, a little bit more flexible now. We used to advise students to get their letters from their junior year teachers, with last year being a little bit sporadic and the students only being in school for a little bit more than half the year. Colleges have said that they're a little bit more flexible with letters from 10th grade or teachers who had the student, in person the whole year. Again, the students should know who's writing for them at this point. If they don't, again, encourage them to see their counselor and have that conversation. But that is another piece that colleges will look at. And being that the test scores have become optional now, some of these other pieces may weigh a little bit more heavily, and they're going to take more of a holistic look at the student. So the letters of recommendation may be a little bit more important. Their extracurriculars may be a little bit more important. And then the last piece on this slide, but what is super important is the essay. So the essay is really the student's opportunity to show the admissions office and the admissions counselor who they are and what's important to them. So it's something that they should take some time working on it. There should be a draft, a redraft. I encourage students to have other people look at it, whether it's a counselor, whether it's an English teacher, a parent, if they'll share it with you. The essay is an important component to an application that otherwise looks similar from student to student. So transcripts look similar, test scores look similar. Even activities within the same school may look similar, or on Long Island. The essay is an opportunity for the student really to separate themselves. People will ask, what should I write about? What's going to get me into an Ivy League school? What's an Ivy League essay look like? And, my answer is always an essay that shows the admissions counselor who you are. So I will usually advise students, if you write an essay, right, and you don't put your name on it, and your best friend picks up that essay in the hallway and can say, oh, this is Susie's essay because it sounds like her, you've written a pretty good essay. Like, that's what college admissions people want to hear, is they want to learn learn more about you. So while the topic is important, the message and what you're saying within that essay is almost more important. The Writing Center, we have writing fellows who can help students with that. They are still meeting with students in the library in person, and they are meeting virtually as well. So there's certainly opportunities for students to get help with their essay, in addition to the counselors do a great job working with students on their essays. Okay, so the GPA, and this slide was added just based off questions that I've received based off how the GPA works. The North Shore policy weights core academic classes. So there's 15 core academic classes that are weighted for graduation in terms of the weighted academic GPA at North Shore. So those core courses include English 9, English 10, English 11. Okay, so that could be an honors English, it could be an IB English when they get to 11th grade. Math 9, Math 10, Math 11, again, could be honors, could be AP or IB. We also weight Regents courses with a +3. Social studies 9, 10, or 11, science 9, 10, or 11, and world languages 9, 10, or 11. And then there's some language on the language has to fulfill a language sequence. If a student is taking 2 languages, the course that they've been in longer will count. So if a student started a language in middle school and then picked up a second language in high school, they will get the weighting in terms of the +3 for a Regents class, or +6 for honors, or +9 for AP or IB, just in the longer sequence. And then there's language on the bottom. Should a child double up and take 2 core academic classes within the same discipline simultaneously in grades 9, 10, and 11, the course in which the child obtains the highest weighted grade will be included in the weighted average. So what that means is if a student doubles up in, let's say, AP IB chemistry, and then they take AP IB biology, the course that they receive the higher grade in will receive the weighting. And just to be clear, this is the policy that's been in place at North Shore a long time, prior to me, prior to Mr. Contreras, maybe prior to Mr. Cousins before him. So this is the policy that's in place. I should add a caveat to this. So most colleges, in terms of how they look at GPAs, will take the GPA and knowing that it varies by school, right? They will put it into an algorithm, and within that college will create their own internal GPA so that they can compare students from North Shore to students from Roslyn, to students from Jericho, to students from Garden City, to students from Illinois, Michigan, Wisconsin, whatever, so that they can compare apples to apples. So it's important to kind of keep that in mind. I will also say, and I know you received a transcript in July, then you received a different transcript in September. We're in the process of looking at the policy, evaluating it, seeing if it makes sense for our students, if it puts our students in the best light. And those conversations are ongoing between myself, Mr. Contreras, Dr. Gerizzo, Dr. Zublionis. And, I know that there's been phone calls to counselors about this, and I've spoken to a number of you. We're happy to answer any questions that you may have. Okay. All right, so test optional, what does it mean? So more and more schools have moved to test optional policies. On the bottom of this slide and at the end is resources that we're going to add to the counseling webpage also. So FairTest keeps a running list of schools that have shifted to test optional or test flexible or test blind. So test optional, what does it mean? So colleges will consider test scores if the student has them, but they're not required for admissions. So in the past, if a student did not submit an ACT or an SAT test score, the college would deem that application incomplete. Now they don't have to submit it. What a lot of colleges are saying, though, is if you have a test score, we will still look at it, and it can benefit the student in terms of admissions. It can benefit the student in terms of scholarship money. So that's really a test optional option. I would advise you, for the schools that you're applying to, or that the student's applying to, reach out to those colleges and question them or go on the website about the language that they're using. Some schools have moved to test flexible. NYU has actually had this policy for a long time. What this means is, while they do still want to see tests, the test that you send can vary from AP, IB scores to SAT scores to ACT scores to some other tests that they may accept. So again, like I would encourage you to look on the website of the colleges that you're applying to and see what language they're using. So test blind. Test blind is different than test optional, where colleges will not look at test scores. So colleges are going to make admissions decisions, scholarship decisions, clearly based off GPA and the other three spokes that we were talking about earlier in terms of letters of recommendation, essay, what has the student been involved with, so they in no way impact admissions or scholarships. The UC system has gone test blind, and that was a big deal. There's not many schools that have announced that they're test blind. Most have announced test optional. The language that they use can vary from school to school. Okay, so what does this mean for admissions? So it's going to be more of a holistic review this year. So this is a shift in policy for a lot of schools. A school like Penn State historically has asked us not to send letters of recommendation. Now they are. So they're going to have to take more of a holistic view at how they evaluate students, whereas in the past, they would look at your GPA, they'd look at your SAT or ACT, they'd look at your application. Yes, they'd look at your activities and the essay, but it was really those first two factors for some of those big schools that really impacted their decision making. Now they're going to have a shift in terms of how they look at students. All right, so letters of recommendation. We talked about this earlier. I'm not going to spend too much time on it. Most colleges will require 2 academic teachers and 1 school counselor. Unless you're applying to a specific program, whether it's engineering, medicine, whatever it might be, the letters can really come from any discipline. We really encourage students to consider teachers that know the student well, both in and out of the classroom. It doesn't have to be a class that the student had the highest grade in. They will need to invite the teacher on Naviance. And a question that usually comes up this time of year is, will additional letters be considered? And that's a question that we always ask college admissions reps when they come to North Shore, or we're speaking with them at events or anything like that. And it really depends. So some schools will not look at additional letters. So by additional letters, I mean a letter from a employer or from a coach or from a supervisor in some capacity. Most admissions people will say that they're going to look at what's required. And then if there's an additional letter and they're going to committee and they need more information, they may pull that letter out. So while I wouldn't go crazy getting 5 or 6 additional letters, if you have one meaningful additional letter that you think is valuable, those can be submitted through Naviance. And it's not going to hurt to do that. I wouldn't advise you inundating admissions counselors with letters from, Johnny's uncle and this one's neighbor and things like that. I think less is more in terms of the additional letters. I coached sports for years prior to coming to North Shore, and the relationship that I formed with students from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. after school was a very different relationship. So there's value in those letters. And that's why if students can find teachers where they were a club advisor or a coach or something like that, sometimes those can be great letters. All right, so this is obviously a new slide this year. The Common App has added a COVID-19 question in terms of how it impacted the student. Tulane put out a wonderful blog about this. I have a link to it at the end of the presentation. The presentation will be sent out. And they just really posed some questions to the students, right? So are my experiences different from others? Are there noticeable changes on my transcript? Am I aware of my privilege? Am I being specific? Am I explaining rather than complaining? Is this information being included elsewhere on my application? So these are just some questions for students to consider. There's some examples in there of what you may want to share, what you may not want to share. Speaking with students, I think if they were dramatically impacted by COVID, I think it's important for colleges to know that. If you're struggling for what to write in this part, maybe you don't need to fill it out. It is also an opportunity to share if they missed out on something, whether it's a club or a sport or something like that, and that was really meaningful to them. it could be added here. But really taking these questions into consideration can be helpful. And again, I shared that blog at the end of the presentation. This presentation it's being recorded. It'll also be sent out to you. All right, so what do we do now? What should the students be doing? Step one is certainly meeting with their counselor and having a conversation, whether it's in person, whether it's virtually, over the phone, whatever that looks like. The counselors are here to help you and really guide you through this process. And as I said, they're very experienced and can certainly point you in the right direction. Finalizing a college list. Again, the counselors can certainly help you with that. Researching colleges, which I know is more difficult with COVID and some of the universities not being open. As I said earlier, a lot of colleges have information on their websites in terms of virtual tours. Some of them are setting up Zoom links with students individually or in groups. We are, to the next bullet, we have virtual college visits really every day, starting last week through the end of October. It's certainly different, and there's been some technical glitches here and there, but the admissions reps are treating it no different than when they're in person. So some of them are doing presentations. We had Binghamton today. She did a presentation and then took questions. We had Vanderbilt this afternoon. She made it more of a conversation and answered questions and asked the students questions. And it is still FaceTime with an admissions rep. So, our office really made an effort to try to keep those opportunities for our seniors. A lot of my colleagues in neighboring districts, and I get it, canceled them, just saying there's too much to deal with. We don't know how we would do them. So we wanted to keep those opportunities for our students. And I think for the students that have attended virtually, it's been helpful. If there's questions about it, if anybody has a hard time getting into those visits, please encourage them to email the counselor or me, and we could certainly work through those. But that list was sent out, and I can certainly share that with you again. It's also available in the class of 2021 Google Classroom. So finalized testing, and I say this with a shake of the head because I've spoken to a number of you about the issues we experienced with College Board last weekend. And just to be transparent with that, we had to lower our SAT numbers due to COVID in May. We did that. College Board informed us that they would contact the families. They did not. They randomly issued a refund sometime in September and removed people from the list. So that I was disappointed in College Board's lack of communication. We are currently looking into options. I've spoken to a couple parents even this morning and emailed this afternoon. We're looking into options to help any families that were impacted by that. If you were impacted by that, please send me an email. We'd like to know. If you weren't able to test last weekend or you're not able to test this weekend, and we're looking into opportunities that College Board has for us to figure that out. Doing well senior year. So this is super important for the seniors to know that colleges will look at their mid-year grades. While I didn't put it as one of the 5 spokes that they look at, it is a piece of the application depending on when they apply. More so for early action and regular decision than the early decision, but it is a piece, so definitely encourage the students to do well. The counselors will be sending that message. And then finishing up applications. So the main essay, supplemental essays, I didn't talk about too much earlier. The key to the supplemental essays is really to research the schools and stroke the school's ego that you've looked up their programs and you've looked up their dorms and you've visited if you visited. If not, you took a virtual tour, and really show them that you've researched that school and try to emphasize why it's a good fit for you. Okay, and then completing the FAFSA by October 1st. They will use the prior years tax information. The link to the financial aid that was sent out, there's great information in there, so please feel free to check that out if you have financial aid questions. So this is just a screenshot of, we created a class of 2021 Google Classroom. I invited every senior on it. We have over 200 seniors that have accepted our invitation, so I'm excited about that. It's a great way for me to disseminate and the counselors to disseminate information to students relatively quickly without blasting emails out and inundating people's inboxes. So we'll continue to update this throughout the year. The code is on there, so encourage the students to utilize this. this is a list of upcoming virtual events. This is in the process of being added to the website as well. So there's virtual college fairs that are happening, and this is obviously in addition to the individual college visits that we have. Again, this link to this presentation will be shared with you, also recorded. So I am going to click to the next one. I recognize I'm clicking through it quickly, and you may not have had all the information. If you want to take a screenshot of it, that's totally fine as well. All right, and then resources. So the Tulane blog is listed on here. The Senior Assembly is on here. The Financial Aid Night is on here. The test optional list is on here. I will add the virtual college visits to this too prior to emailing it out to you. And then we ran 3 fireside chats with admissions counselors in August. We had Emory, Binghamton, and Michigan. And really those conversations, I learned a lot about the way that colleges are kind of evaluating students this year, and how different colleges are managing even their current freshmen. So if you want to check those out, you could certainly do that as well. So I thank you all for coming. I hope you learned some from this. I will take some questions. I'm going to stop sharing my screen in a second, so bear with me. And I see someone put something in the chat. I'm going to click over so I can see that. And then, correct, the FAFSA opens October 1st, not due October 1st. Thank you. And again, that's the prior year's tax information. So next question, my son is considering applying to Canadian colleges. How is that process different from the US application? While the application is different, it's just really filling out information in a different way. The counselors can certainly work with the student on that. The deadlines may be a bit different depending on the school, so I would definitely look into that. But I've had students do more so the Canadian applications. Yeah, we could certainly work with the student on that. The process isn't terribly different. It just looks a little bit different. Any other questions? And feel free to unmute yourself and actually ask a question if you want. Sure, we have a question about, can you elaborate on where you can put AP scores if you're submitting standardized test scores? Okay, so AP scores you can report on the Common App. You can self-report them there. You can also send them officially through College Board, just as if you were submitting your SAT scores. It can be part of your score profile. And again, the counselors can kind of walk you through that. Okay. And then there was a question about, what is your opinion on how the GPA adjustment compares to other schools? Follow-up, in general, if my son's GPA is better than his SAT score, should he still submit his SAT score? Okay, so I'll answer the GPA question first. We have done research in terms of the GPAs and how other schools do them. Most schools will, whereas we include 15 courses, most schools will include the same courses in the unweighted GPA in the weighted, and the weighted just receives the added point value. So that's, to answer that question, that's typically how most schools do it. And that's the discussion that we're having now in terms of moving forward, what benefits our students more. To Kevin's question, in general, if my son's GPA is better than his SAT score, should he still submit his SAT score? So I think number one, it could vary by school, right? So I would encourage your son to have a conversation with their counselor, and if their GPA is significantly higher than their test score, they may not need to submit it. With that said, if the test score is good in comparison when you're looking at Naviance, having a test score higher than the mean for that school or the average for that school that's accepted, it can factor into scholarships and things like that. So his schools that may be more of a safer option, maybe he submits his test scores to those. The schools that are a little bit more of a reach, and if those test scores are a little bit lower compared to the GPA, maybe he doesn't submit them there. But again, that's a conversation that the counselors can certainly advise you on. So question, just wanted to confirm, submission of SAT and ACT scores are totally up to the student. Can choose to submit one sitting and withhold another. Absolutely, yeah. So the counselors do not submit any SAT or ACT scores really for that reason. When I first became a counselor in my previous school, they were on the transcript and we just sent them to everyone because there was no option. And as the students had options in terms of what they submit and didn't submit, that process really across all schools changed, and students can submit, if they took the test 3 times, they could submit one sitting and not the other 2. So that's really, really up to the student, up to the family really to submit those. Okay, how do you report that the student is an IB diploma candidate? So we do list IB diploma candidate on the transcript, so that will be on there prior to going out to colleges. But then another way to do that would also be to put that in the Common App. There's a section for academic honors, and it could go in there. They allow you to put 5 entries in there. Normally students will put National Honor Society, Honor Roll, Spanish Honor Society. So, that would be a good spot to put that in there. Okay, so follow up on the GPA question. How did North Shore approach of the homeschool adjustment for March to end of last school year compare? Okay, so I guess the question is in terms of how we managed the grading during the closure. So the way we did our grades last year was first quarter, second quarter were 30%. We combined quarter 3 with quarter 4 to make that 30%. And then the midterm, which is consistent with prior years, averaged in as 10%. So that equaled the final grade for the students. And in comparison with other schools, I think it was pretty consistent with what a lot of schools did in terms of merging the end of the year. Some schools went strictly pass fail for the third and fourth term. We felt why we didn't do that, and not to get too much into this, but that didn't give students an opportunity to improve during the closure. So we didn't want to follow that policy. We did add, consistent with other schools, language on the profile explaining to colleges how we did the grading last year, just so they know. Okay, next question. North Shore doesn't rank. Does that mean that any scholarships and certain programs for the top 10%, etc., are not a possibility? No, while we don't rank individually, we can still advise if students are in the top 10%. So I would encourage them to speak to their counselor about that. We don't want students to lose any opportunities for scholarships based on any internal North Shore programs. So speak to your counselor, and we can share that information more generally, not specifically about where they are in terms of numbers. Okay, next question. How soon will my child get the results of the SAT test on 10/3? With digital tests now and digital scores, usually they come back within a couple weeks. So I would say probably on the conservative side, 3 to 4 weeks after taking the test. Okay, how do colleges track students' interest? By their email address or their name and address. My daughter wanted to have an email dedicated just for colleges. Her previous dedicated email became overwhelmed with colleges she is not interested in. So normally it's by their name and sometimes by date of birth, because the name can be consistent. Not so much the email address. But again, that may vary by school. I would say the address would probably be a good indicator for them as well. And some schools track interest, some schools do not. During COVID, I've had some schools say that they've tracked interest previously, but they didn't think it was fair to do so now. Okay. All right. Any other? Oh. Okay. Can you explain again the concept you stated about colleges using apples to apples comparisons of North Shore GPAs to other high schools? And to confirm, North Shore Regions classes have +3, honors +6, and AP +9. Is that right? Does any class get a 0 positive weighting? Okay, so just to explain, it's a good question. I know I ran through it quickly. So the way North Shore weights classes, so Regents gets a +3 weighting, Honors gets a +6 weighting, and AP gets a +9 weighting. With that said, there's only 15 classes that are included in the weighting GPA. So it's the English 9, English 10, English 11, Math 9, 10, and 11, Science 9, 10, and 11, Social Studies 9, 10, and 11, Language 9, 10, and 11. So that does mean that there's some AP or IB courses that may not fall in that category that does not get a weighting. And typically those would be the courses outside. So for example, AP IB theater, AP drawing and painting, AP psychology, AP statistics. Like those are courses that technically under the policy would not get weighted. And that's the North Shore. That's been the North Shore policy for years. It's something we're looking into. To my point about apples to apples, most colleges, when they receive a transcript, whether it's from North Shore, Herrick's, Roslyn, whatever, they have somebody in their office who will take the data that they want, put it into an algorithm, and they create an internal GPA. Really for this reason, like the way North Shore weights their classes is different than the other outside schools. They want to be able to compare people relatively quickly. So a lot of college admissions offices will do that. So how does our weighting policy compare to neighboring districts on Long Island? As I said earlier, we did some research last year, and our policy is very different than other schools, just to be pretty upfront and transparent about it. Most schools, there's unweighted that includes all courses, and then there's weighting that includes all courses plus the added value for those weighted classes. All right, and Mr. Contreras and I have had many conversations about the policy. Dr. Gerizzo has been involved in those with Dr. Zublionis. It's an ongoing conversation, and we certainly are looking into it. So you think are intimately aware of those differences in policy? It's listed on our profile compared to other profiles, so I do think that they have an idea of it. I don't know that they understand the policy as well as, it took me some time to learn the policy. So I don't know that they're as intimately aware as we may think they are. So we did speak to some colleges last year, and there was some confusion on their end. So. Okay, my child will not be taking the SAT until the end of October and ACT early November. Will she be able to apply for early action and meet all the application deadlines? So it depends on the school. So most schools are test optional now. So she will certainly not be penalized if she doesn't submit. If she doesn't submit a test score, she can still apply. They'll still evaluate her application. I would advise that she indicate on her Common App that she's taking. So there's a spot under testing to indicate tests to be taken, and she should put those dates on there. And then if she's going to submit those scores, if you feel confident that she's going to do well and you want to submit those scores, that will alert colleges to potential scores that might be coming her way. All right. She could also submit if she has previous scores that that you want to share. Yes, most SUNYs, if not all SUNYs, have moved test optional, which is new. Oh, Mr. McClellan, I just saw your other question. So is it something to discuss with colleges? It's really up to you. If you feel your student has an opportunity to speak to admissions rep and that could benefit her, you could certainly do that. All right. Any other questions? I really appreciate you all coming. can North Shore accommodate extra seating for SAT or ACT? So we have a North Shore specific ACT scheduled on October 24th that you might still be able to register for. I know we have low registration right now. We are looking into to SAT options. We reached out to College Board today, was able to connect with someone. I actually have a meeting tomorrow with Mr. Contreras, Dr. Zublionis, Mr. Shea, myself to discuss a potential option that could help our students. So we're looking into it. College Board did not let us add seats for last weekend. They're not letting us add seats for this weekend. That was an ask that we did ask them, but they said no. So we are looking into opportunities moving forward. And that information will be shared with you all. I hope you don't mind getting all my emails. All right, and if anything comes up specific to your child, feel free to reach out to your counselor. Feel free to reach out to me. I'll put my email address in the chat. Most of you already have it. It's just my last initial, last name, then first initial. All right, and thank you all for coming. You have a great evening. I hope this process isn't too stressful for you.